Hi, this is Mary McCarley. I'm so sorry I can't be here today, but I am pre-recording this, and the moderator, Bill Bodie, will be able to answer your questions as he is a friend of mine, also working in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. My name is Mary McCarley. I teach health education, sports med, and PE at Hawthorne Academy of Health Sciences. And today, I am going to be talking about 5 ways to supercharge your health classroom. So the 5 strategies that we're going to go over are a case study, nutrition menu project, above the influence newspaper, depth and complexity questions, and what I like to call the date. Everything I present on, everything will be in this resource folder, including all assignments, activities, rubrics, anything that you need. Also on the last slide, if you have any additional questions, I did include my email address that you guys can email me. So let's get started. So the first strategy is the case study. So case study there's different ways to implement it. So let's first just kind of look what the case study is. So on the first day of health, I will introduce my students to the following 6 people. And the people in the classroom are actually, there's a picture of them, and I laminate it, put their name underneath it, and so the 6 people are hanging on the bulletin board in the classroom. So the students see our 6 individuals every single day. They know them by name. They actually think that they're real people. We talk about them as if they're our friends, and there's just a constant reminder of this ongoing 9-week project. So there's different ways to implement it. This is how I implement it, and I'll give you a second option if you don't want to carry it over 9 weeks. So I tell them that we're going to follow the lives of 6 people over the next 9 weeks to determine their fate. 2 individuals will live long, healthy lives, 3 will die, and 1 will be diagnosed with a life-threatening disease. Based on the clues that I give you throughout health, you will have to decide which 2 live, which 3 die in their cause of death, and which is diagnosed with a life-threatening condition, and the name of that life-threatening condition. And then I allow students to, if they choose, that we follow the life of Julie Newman. Hers is a little bit different. She actually is diagnosed with polycystic ovarian disease, and then that is not part of our North Carolina standards, but it is the leading cause of infertility for women. And I just wanted to kind of shine light on the issue and to learn more about it. I've actually had several students, all of my students want to follow her life. And I've been doing my case studies for about 6 years now. And I've probably had 6 or 7 students display a lot of the same symptoms of Julie, and were later diagnosed with polycystic ovarian disease, which is, and had a family history of it. So here are our people. So this is Joanna. She's 43. And on the first day of health, the only thing they're going to get is the name, the picture, and the very short bio. So these would be hanging in class and also would be on my PowerPoint the first day of health. So I would say this is Joanna. She's 43, mother of 2 who works at Bank of America. And what I would do, I'm giving you the clues right now. But on the first day of health, the only thing my students would get is the name, the picture, and the bio. So here are her clues. Throughout health, like the first clue, Joanna has a loving and supportive family. She truly enjoys the time she spends together with her family. So I would actually take that clue and I would embed it into my healthy relationships unit. The PowerPoint on healthy relationships. And so as I'm teaching the students the qualities of a healthy relationship, I would hit, the next slide would pop up and it would say clue, Joanna Martinez, have her picture again, and it says the clue. The students would then turn to their notebook, and they would turn to the section on case studies, and they would write down that clue as a protective factor. And we later find out, if you scroll your eyes down, that Joanna has a body mass index of 30. So during the nutrition unit, when we're talking about the BMI chart and maintaining a healthy weight, I would have a clue pops up. And the students would then turn back to the note-taking sheet on Joanna, and they would write down her body mass index. We later find out that she's diabetic. During the alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs unit, we find out that she's a current smoker, but she does plan on quitting coming soon. That's still a risk factor. So the students, as they get their clues, have to differentiate if it's a risk or protective factor. And then they're constantly making predictions throughout the 9 weeks. I'll also, to make it challenging, I'll just put additional information in there. So my students know a little bit about LDL and HDL, but haven't memorized the numbers of which good and bad. So if you notice, I put the LDL as 190. The students are going to need to do a little additional research. The MTHFR gene mutation. They're going to need to research that. But if they can figure out what they think that happened to Joanna, so in this case she has a heart attack, they can then make the connection between the MTHFR gene mutation and a heart attack. Same with triglyceride levels, not something I cover in health, and the low thyroid, also not part of our curriculum, but very important information for students to know and research. So it constantly keeps the students interested and, desiring more information. So in this case, this one, I felt like I kind of gave it away with the last clue. She had a tingling in her left arm with pain during movement and shortness of breath. So the students are thinking heart attack. But here's the part that makes this assignment, I think, really exciting, is the actual assignment. Once they figure out the cases and they figured out the individuals that died, lived, and the one that was diagnosed with a life-threatening condition, they have to write a half-page paper for each person. And they can't say Joanna Martinez died of a heart attack and regurgitate all the clues that I just gave them. They actually have to say, Joanna uses the NuvaRing, which is a hormonal form of contraception. In addition, she's a smoker. Women who use hormonal forms of contraception and who are smokers increase their risk of a blood clot, which increases their risk of a heart attack. Joanna's a current smoker. Smoking increases blood pressure, which increases your risk of a heart attack. So they have to take the risk factors and kind of dissect them, dig deeper to find the connection between having a heart attack and justify that in their written response. So it is possible you may have a student come up with a different diagnosis, and as long as they can justify it based on all the clues and risk and protective factors, they could still get the answer right. So Joanna does die of a heart attack. So once again, in that folder on slide 2, all the clues are there for you, all the assignment, the rubric, the clue sheets that you would give your students. Everything is very self-explanatory and in that folder. So Maria Hepp, she's 24 years old, college graduate who's currently looking for a job as a nurse. So once again, these are all the clues that I would actually embed into my PowerPoint. And I'll tell you at the end a different way of presenting this to your students, implementing it in class. But she's genital herpes from her boyfriend at age 17, 16 sexual partners, only uses condoms 60% of the time. While under the influence, got a tattoo body piercing. She binge drinks. She uses ecstasy twice, crystal meth, but didn't like the negative effects. But now she's in a long-term monogamous relationship with Joe, which is a protective factor. And she's excited about her job. And her diagnosis is HIV positive. And so the students would have to, once again, try to figure out the connection between having herpes and how that increases your risk of HIV. So they would have to go through each one of the risk factors and justify HIV. So Tom Johnson lives, and based on I always want to keep my kids, engaged and making predictions about about our case studies. So He's a veteran, and he was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. So a lot of the students know a little bit about PTSD. They know that there's a high suicide rate among people with PTSD. So they're making predictions. They're thinking, oh my goodness, he's definitely one who dies. But what we learn about Tom later on is that he's got a supportive family and wife, but we do find out that he was diagnosed with depression, which is a huge risk factor. But then as we go through the 9 weeks, we find out that he quit drinking. He exercises every morning, which is a protective factor, increases his feeling of happiness, releases dopamine and endorphins, which increases your feeling of happiness. He involves himself in the community. So he's putting all these things in place to change his situation. He's also getting counseling. So the students even though they early on predicted that he would die, Tom lives. And, once the students have figured everything out and they've written their papers and we've kind of come back together at the end, Tom is the one that I use, and I kind of bring it home for the students. And I'll tell my students that, you may have a lot of obstacles in your life and some things that you can't control right now. And you may be a Tom Johnson, but you can put all these amazing protective factors in your life. You can do these things to help your situation. And that kind of, I feel like, brings it home for the students. And this is Sally Grimes. She's 22, UNCC college graduate, and took a job in Alaska. So we learn a little bit about Sally. They always question, like, lives in Alaska, is that a risk or protective factor? And I don't tell them. I tell them that if they're unsure, just write it off to the side, and you can later add it or switch it. But if you, as you skim through, you'll find out that she's experiencing lots of high stress, feelings of hopelessness, low dopamine and serotonin due to genetics. Hemoglobin indicates, and we don't talk about hemoglobin in class, but that indicates anemia, which is the feelings of feeling blah, down. And she has depression, and she commits suicide. So that's another, and they're going to need to go back and look at all those risk factors, and they're going to justify. So they're going to need to say that cocaine's short and long-term effects are depression. People with depression are at a higher risk of suicide. John Parrish. So we learn about John, and he, as we look at these, smoked cigarettes. He had oral HPV, so I would actually give that oral HPV clue during the STD, as we're talking about STDs. Drank heavily. He is lean, which is a protective factor, but we find that he's got a diet low in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, which are those great antioxidant foods that he is not getting of, and he ends up with throat cancer. And he does die. And Martha Dean, so based on her appearance, she has a weight issue, and we learn that she has a BMI of 31, is pre-diabetic, so things are not looking good for her. She's got a controlling husband. But Len, as we go through, she starts putting all these protective factors in place. She quit smoking. She's changed her eating habits. She lost weight, and she lives. And here is our bonus case. So this is Julie Newman. And she is diagnosed, some students may choose to do this as extra credit, and she's diagnosed with polycystic ovarian disease. So how do you implement something like this in class? So like I said, I embed all the clues into my lessons, and I give the students clue sheets. If that is overwhelming or that's too much, another idea is your last 2 weeks of health before you review for the final exam, maybe that 1 week before you start reviewing, is you give the students the clues. And you say, here are our case studies. Let's solve these cases. And you let them work in groups of 3, and they solve the case. And maybe as a group, they've got to write their papers, their half-page papers. Another idea is to create 7 groups and distribute each group with a case and let them solve the case. But I think what the most exciting part is, students really enjoy this. And when students finish early, or if students want extra credit, or if students just want to do that, allow the students, maybe on day 2, after the students have cracked the case, on the next day you say, okay, I need you to go back to your groups. I need you to come up with a new case study. This person needs to have a name, a picture, a bio, and I want you to come up with the clues. And I'm going to use your case studies in my next semester class. Students have done that. I've great clues, and I've just kind of gone in, changed some of the pictures, and allow the students to make the new case studies, and that's a ton of fun for them. So it is possible, just so everyone knows. My students absolutely love it, and it's a lot of work to create new cases. So how do you take a project that you did first semester and do the same project next semester without the students telling each other the answers? So what I do is I just change all the names, change the pictures, tell your students, thank you so much for making new case studies. I will be implementing these next semester. Maybe even take some of their pictures and names and put them onto your old case studies. You can do that. So the students are really doing the students from first semester are doing the same case studies as second semester, but they don't think to tell each other the answers because as they walk in your class to say hello, they see new names and new pictures. So that's a way of doing it. But it really increases student engagement and allows them to make connections between the health unit. And they're constantly weighing their risk and protective factors to determine somebody's fate. And then you can always kind of bring it home for them and once again talk about, how many risk factors are you willing to put into your life until something life-changing happens to you. And then talking about putting in the protective factors that to outweigh some of those risk factors you may have put in or they may have been put on you. So that's my strategy number one. So once again, everything you would need to implement this in class is in that folder. So strategy number two is the nutrition menu project. So this is a project that I use in class. There's different ways to implement. I'm going to show you what it looks like, but let me tell you how you may want to implement this in class. So you may want to teach the first half of class and then allow your students to explore the nutrition menu project the second half of class. So they're doing the majority of work in class. The other option is to teach your entire unit on nutrition and then give them three or four classes of 90 minutes to work on the menu. And the other option is to assign it as a homework assignment over 2 weeks during your nutrition unit. The fun part about this project is it really allows students to explore what they want related to nutrition. So the first half of class, here's how I implement it. The first half of class, I teach the standards. I want students to know about my plate. And the second half of class, then they dive in to kind of exploring their own. So the appetizers, they're gathering content. The entrees, they're applying content. The desserts, their application to your life and family health. The desserts can only be done at home. So let's click on it and see what it looks like. So what I would do, this is a view only, then you're able to access this. So if you, what you would do is you would make a copy of it, and that way you can edit and change it. I'll probably go in and edit and change it myself. I implemented it for the first time last year, and students really did enjoy it. There's my unit plan at the top, days 1 through 11, so students knew what days they would be working on it the second half of class. You could obviously delete that and change it. So gathering content. So students can kind of pick and choose what they want to do. Do they want to watch a video clip? Because number 2, they could watch a video clip. On number 1, they're reading an article on healthy weight loss. Do they want to know more? Do they want to learn about high blood pressure because they have a family history, or maybe they have an issue with weight, or their family does, and they might want to learn about number 1. 8 weight mistakes is in number 3. It's an article. But you'll notice with each one of them, they click on it and they can either read the article, watch the video clip, and every assignment has, and every number has an assignment linked to it. And it will also tell them the 4 points. So if you notice, it will say 4 points. Some of these are 8 pointers. So scrolling back up, there's a rubric for appetizers. It's just a real basic, easy rubric. My students had to gather 16 points last year. I think I'm actually going to change that to 8 points or 12 points. I felt like that was kind of a lot. But you could increase it. But there's a lot of different options. They may want to learn about milk allergies and lactose intolerant. And maybe they want to watch Food Inc. and write a one-page paper. Eating better on a budget, the obesity epidemic. Gives them lots of why people overeat, lots of different options. This is an excellent one. The truth about sugar is sometimes I'll even up the points on that to really encourage students to do it. But they watch a video, they skim an article. It's an excellent video clip. And then I always give them student choice. Maybe there's a topic on there that they want to learn more about, but I didn't include it. I probably will go back in. I haven't gone in yet, but just add more on maybe preservatives, eating organic. And so you can go in and add these as long as you will make a copy, and then you can edit it. Then they move on to their entrees. There's the rubric at the top. So now they're really applying it. They're researching nutrition apps. They're researching their favorite meals and filling out this assignment. They're investigating their own kitchen using the Fuducate app, which is a food scanner. So they're creating diet plans for an athlete, for you yourself, or they're I think there's one for pregnancy. They're making their own restaurant menu. And then students need to gather points. And then this last one, desserts, they get to choose from one of 3 options. I love all 3 of these projects. I especially love project number 1 and project number 3. That's kind of the students love it. So maybe if you don't implement this in your class, I would strongly suggest that you at least go look at that number 1 and number 3, and you just may want to use that as a project at the end of your nutrition unit. Maybe if you never implement this nutrition menu in class, and then from there you can total up their grade. And going back, if you go back into the folder, you will see that there's also a rubric. If you guys have any questions or you need something, you can always email me and I can share it with you directly too. So this is the nutrition menu project. My students have really enjoyed it. I've thought about doing it in other units like sex ed or mental and emotional health. I just haven't created those yet. But I think you could take this idea of scaffolding or the differentiation and use it in other units. So let's go back to the, so this is number 3, above the influence newspaper. So this is you call it a project that I give my students after I teach the tobacco, alcohol, and other drugs unit. You can use this project as a review for the exam. You could use it as the exam. You could allow students to use their notes, or you may tell them that they cannot use their notes when creating these newspapers. So what I did is I took the standards for alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, and I implemented them into a newspaper. So once again, if you're interested in this assignment and rubric, it is in that folder. But I just pulled 2 examples of articles. So the students are going to create a newspaper on. We do it on Google Drive, on Google, and they come up with a title, and all the expectations for the newspaper are in that assignment folder that I said, the rubric. But these were 2 examples. Include one article based on the interview of a coroner on a case involving the death of an 18-year-old boy to alcohol poisoning. So the students are writing their own newspaper articles. They're coming up with the pictures. They have to include a title, include the cause of death of alcohol poisoning, and then there's your content. That's what you want. That's what you taught them in class. 3 or more signs of alcohol poisoning, 3 or more ways to respond if a person has alcohol poisoning. So the students are going back into their notes, and they are embedding that information into their own student-created newspaper article. It's awesome literacy. It's getting the kids to think from other perspectives and write from other perspectives. And is practice the just writing. And here's another example of an editorial. Include one editorial from the perspective of a person dying from a tobacco-related disease on why a person should not use tobacco products. So 5 or more harmful ingredients in tobacco, why it's addicting, 5 or more long-term effects of tobacco use, and include the person's advice, the one who is dying, on not using tobacco products. So it really allows students to be creative, to write, but also to review the information in the notes that you gave them. The other idea is that you just give this to them as their ATOD project, and they research it themselves. That's another idea. I teach it first, and then I have them do this as their end of unit project. But you could just allow them to research it on their own and come up with their own newspaper articles. So those students who I consider my high flyers, who are going to finish this in 2 days, 2 90-minute classes, at the end have what I call take the challenge. And at that point in time, they can earn some extra credit points or not. And they'll have like the slammer page, the wanted ad. And there's several other suggestions I gave to kind of spruce up their newspapers and to add extra information. So I have each student, it probably takes 3 days, three 90-minute classes. I have each student in front of a laptop, and they are typing and engaged, and they really enjoy creating these. Having talked to another teacher, actually, Bill Bodie, who's moderating this, he took this idea and he changed it a little bit, and he created a class newspaper. So he had students, he divided up the responsibility, increased the amount of articles that needed to be in there, and then he had each student work on an article. Then he had a student proofread the article and send it to the editor, who was the one in charge of actually putting everything together in a newspaper. And then from there, in order to get kids to read each other's articles and kind of dive back into the content, review for your exam, however you wanted to use it, you could have the students go back in and have to read the newspaper and ask them specific questions like, what are the 3 signs of alcohol poisoning? So they're going to need to go back into the articles and as a review and fill out the review sheet. So that's another way of implementing it, above the influence newspaper. Next strategy. So depth and complexity questioning. So kind of the goal of this, I do this every single day in class. So when the students walk in, this is how I use it. When the students walk in, a lot of teachers use what they call a warm-up or a journal write or something on the board to get the kids thinking about the topic of the day. So when my students come in, they would see the Scholar, Collegiate, and Genius questions. So rather than just one question like, what do you know about contraception? And that these 3 questions happen to relate to contraception unit, but we're going to get into that in the content, and I may ask that question after the warm-up, but I want my kids to think a little bit broader. So I would take these 3 questions, I would embed them in my PowerPoints as the students warm up. They sit down. You may have your students write. I don't have my students write on these questions, but I would just have them to think about, read the 3 questions, see which ones you can answer, start forming opinions, and let's share out as a class. So the students may sit for a little bit, read the question, think about it, and I would say, who would like to share? And we don't always answer all 3 questions depending on time, but students really love to be challenged by the Genius question. They love to share out. They want their classmates to know that they can answer the Genius question. So your Scholar question is your lower level question. Your Collegiate question is kind of the mid, and your Genius question is really that question that stretches students. The Genius question will often analyze different perspectives, patterns, trends over time, the big idea, going across disciplines, and unanswered questions in health education. And that's, we want our students to make connections to other areas. So in this one, the Genius question will relate to world history and the one-child policy in China. If you like this idea, I did put all of my questions that I use, I embedded it onto a Word document that you can take those and just put them into your PowerPoints. You could also use this at the end of class. If you don't like the questions that I've included, you can come up with your own Scholar, Collegiate, and Genius questions. But it's the whole idea of allowing all students to be engaged and to challenge themselves based on their own academic level. It's great when administration asks you how you differentiate your classroom. There's a great example of how you differentiate. I differentiate my classroom every single day. So that is called depth and complexity questioning. And my last my last strategy is what I like to call the date. So I have 2 on here. I have one, the date related to contraception, and the next one is on mental and emotional health. So what I do is on the first day of my sex ed unit, I'll introduce what we're going to be covering, and then I'll tell them at the end of this unit, you guys will be going out on a date at Outback. And I said, Outback is going to be in our classroom. And the kids get excited. And I'll say that all the things we learned in the sex ed unit, I need you to apply them to real life scenarios. And you will be on a date. And you're going to have to communicate with your partner. So it puts it into a real world application. So let's say today is the last day of the unit. And maybe they've already taken their test. Maybe this is a review for the test, but the students walk in and on the whiteboard, I have Outback, like the actual Outback sign. And the desks are arranged into tables. So you can have like a table of 2. You can put 4 desks together to make a booth. And in the front of the classroom, I have a table for 2. A tablecloth over it, and some fake flowers in the front. And so the students sit down, and I haven't said a word yet. The bell rings, and I'll just just go. I'll say, hi, welcome to Outback. Today, I am your hostess, Mary McCarley. I'm so excited you guys are here today, and you will be going out on a date. Every one of you guys in this classroom are seated in Outback, and several of you guys will be at the date table. But all of you guys will be involved in this, in the date. And so just kind of set up this, the students are excited, and the table with the tablecloth makes it really exciting. And so I will just, before I even ask for a volunteer, I will reach my hand into a bag, and I will pull out a scenario, and I will say to the entire class, Mark Jackson. I need a Mark Jackson. He's age 28. He works in car sales at a Nissan dealership, and that's all I'll say. And students are pretty excited to volunteer. They'll raise their hand, and they'll take a seat at the date table. And then I'll say Mark Jackson needs a friend. And so someone will raise their hand and they'll sit at the date table. Then I tell the audience that you will be listening in on this date's conversation. And at any point in time, this date cannot solve their problem. They are going to phone a friend. At that point in time, they will pull out their phone, just pretend, pull out their phone, and they will look towards the audience. If you feel like that you can help them solve their problem, you can raise your hand, you can signal to them in some way, and I need you to join the table to help them solve their problem. So then I will hand the scenario to Mark Jackson, age 28, and he takes the scenario from me. He looks at this friend across the table, and he says, hey, thanks for meeting up with me to talk about this awkward topic. I feel strange talking about it, but I need some advice. My girl and I are thinking about sex, but I'm not ready to be a dad. Can you give me some advice? How can we protect ourselves against pregnancy? And then the friend responds. So it's a lot of fun when the students are actually able to talk about it, and they'll say things like hormonal form of contraception or the things that you taught them, but they're able to say it, apply it, discuss it with a friend. So in this case, he may talk about the hormonal forms of contraception available for a girl, also the importance of using a condom. And once he's kind of finished, Mark would go back and say, I'm so embarrassed to ask this question, but I've never used a condom before. Can you explain the steps to proper use? And, just obviously make sure that that's part of my lesson as I teach them the steps to proper use. If that's not something you teach them, then maybe you just don't include that part or delete that part. And at that point in time, if the friend can't come up with what I have, the 12 steps, then they would phone a friend and bring somebody in. After that, we all clap, yay, yay, and then those two students go back to their seat, and you pull another scenario, and you say, Martha Wilson, age 32, high school world history teacher at East Mecklenburg High School. Who's my Martha Wilson? And someone's going to raise their hand, and they'll sit down, and same thing. She may have a conversation with her husband or her boyfriend or her girlfriend. And it really allows students to process and to practice. I think this generation especially, because they are so social media and texting based, they really need to work on their conversational skills and being able to talk about situations. So this is the date. I have included all my scenarios for you in that folder. And the last one, when I introduce the mental and emotional health unit, I also say, once again, we'll be going back to Outback on our dates, and you'll need to apply the information that we learned. So I do it the exact same way. And this time, the scenarios are going to be related to mental and emotional health, and they'll apply that information. So, you could do it for other units too. And so those are my five strategies. Once again, I'm so sorry I wasn't able to be here. I had a last minute engagement I had to be at, and so I'm really sorry, but Bill Bodie, the moderator, is here and can answer questions for you. Here's my contact information, Mary McCarley at cms.k12ncus. I also have a store on Teacher Pay Teacher if you need additional ideas. And once again, just scrolling back up to slide 2, there's a folder that you can access that has all the information. It has this presentation in there with all the additional resources, activities, assessments, and PowerPoints. So right here, folder at the bottom of the page. So thank you so much for coming to my presentation. I really appreciate it. I hope that of these 5 strategies, maybe one you could use in your classroom or more than one, but I really appreciate you guys attending this. Thank you. Have a great day.